Welcome to our podcast. I'm Jeff Pelletier. The purpose of our podcast is a simple question. Why is Israel important? Over the next many episodes, my partner Neil Johnson and I will seek to answer this question. There are just barely over 14 million descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the world today, and about 5.5 million of them live in Israel. The rest are scattered across and among the nations. For the sake of our podcast, Israel is both a country and a people. Welcome, friends. We'd love for you to interact with the show on Facebook. We post all our shows there, plus interesting stories about Israel for you to comment about. If you have a question about the show, or if you want to disagree or provide an additional insight, that's the place to do it. Israel, why is the Middle East important? Here on Israel, why is the Middle East important? Friends, we are continuing to explore the 5 critically essential people in God's plan: Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, the 5 covenant persons of God's plan. We suggest you download all the episodes and begin with number 1 to get the complete story of the key question we're asking: Israel, why is the Middle East important? And we are not preaching here. We are discovering, something we invite you to do with us. We are not proving a point. We are focused on the plan of God for the world and how it unfolds. And we're letting the Bible and what it tells us, what it says, what it means, do that for us. Neil and I are taking you through the story from the beginning. It's one thing to know the end. It's another to understand the journey. God's plan begins in Genesis. 3 out of the 5 persons God uses are in Genesis. Genesis is the foundation of understanding of God's plan. This will be our 7th show about Abraham. Abraham's story is generally not taught in the manner or the depth that we're giving you. God is a covenant God. He gives us His word and makes a promise, and then He keeps His promises. He made covenants with Adam and Eve and Noah, and now He makes covenants with Abraham. God is faithful, which means you can count on Him and trust His word and His covenants. That's what faithful means. So we see, Neil, here in the unfolding plan of God for Israel, we see here that from a previous chapter that Lot and his family had split with Abraham, and that led him to a place that was not a good choice for Lot and his family. Talk about that place that Lot went to.
Right. So, as you said, we've talked about that before, that Lot had the option. Abraham gave it to him when their flocks, their wealth, their riches, their property grew so large that they had to split for the health of their own flocks and property. Lot voluntarily looked. He saw a fertile plain, and that's what we call the Sodom and Gomorrah area, the 5 cities, and he voluntarily chose, and he went to that place. Yeah, so he split from his uncle Abraham.
Yeah, and he did it in a previous chapter, and we remember that Lot was in trouble, and Abraham went to his rescue with the 5 kings.
That's right,
and saved his butt. But here we are. Lot must have went back.
Well, he obviously did go back, and that's crucial. Even at that stage, the Lord made it clear that the cities were wicked and evil. Now we're going to come up in our story we're about to touch on, where he says it's now reached a boiling point and I've had enough. Yeah, but he has a standard. That's the key. It's not just random. It's not just... And
we're going to talk about that standard in a minute or so.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of chapter 18... Abraham and Sarah are at a particular place.
Right.
And they get some visitors. So what is the place they're at?
Well, the place they're at is called the Oaks of Mamre. This is what an area, remember Mamre was one of the friends who also went with Abraham to fight these 4 kings who came from the east against the 5 kings of the plain. Mamre is Hebron, or Hebron, as we say it, Hebron.
Hebron. And that's today, that's what it's called.
And that's today what it's called. That was the city of David before he went to Jerusalem. That's where the patriarchs, all except for not Leah, Rachel, are buried there, including, as we said in previous broadcasts, that the legend has it that Adam and Eve are also buried there, and that cave is called Machpelah. And it's a very hot spot today. It's quite something. So we can see the reality of this conflict of the good and evil. It's a place that next to Jerusalem. It's one of what's called, Jeff, the 4 holy cities of the land, and it's inflamed just like Jerusalem is. And again, because there's a spiritual significance to that.
Wow. Wow. So Abraham is at that spot in this story.
Very significant.
Interesting.
Very significant that's where he is.
So they get some visitors.
They get some visitors, and it's good to tell right at the outset, Jeff, that we're going to see throughout this. We won't parse it out each specific time, but they are variously 3 men, 3 beings. Yahweh, it says specifically, the Lord God, his name. And it goes back and forth between singular, plural, they, them, we, I, Yahweh, men. Jumping ahead quickly, it won't be until the next chapter, but it actually then refers to them in the same way, but then at the beginning it calls them angels. So we have all kinds of different descriptions of these entities.
So just to give a brief example, verses 1 and 2 of chapter 18. Now the Lord, or Yahweh, appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day, so we're talking noon.
Yeah, sure.
When he lifted up his eyes and looked, behold, 3 men were standing opposite him, and when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant by. And then he goes on to demand, food for them and drink for them and so forth. But that's an example right there of those seemingly convoluted references.
Right, exactly. 3 men, Yahweh, plural, singular. Sees 3, addresses them as a singular. So it's quite an interesting, I don't know what you would call that, theology for sure, but it's very simplistic just to say something simple, but what is exactly going on? It is the mystery. It is the mystery.
It is an amazing amazing mystery there. And it's just a really good thing to ponder, folks. If you're reading that chapter as we speak, it's a great thing to ponder that as a Christian. So they have visitors, and so Abraham responds by treating them as holy, right? And immediately demands that they get food and drink, and he prepares food for them.
Right. Well, as we said, even in that opening chapter that starts this whole thing, it's a lot of action. There's a lot happening. It seems like, wow, from the minute he sees them, it's fast-paced. We see how he reacts, and when he goes to them, it says he looked and saw them, and behold, it's this action. And the word saw, you and I have talked about this before, but just as for the listeners, that saw can mean more than just physically I see something, like I saw a sign, I saw a friend. It connotes that he was aware of something more. He perceived, he understood, he grasped there's more to this than that. And if you see how he now goes on to react to these celestial beings, as it turns out, Yahweh being one of these people, here's this great, powerful man who is all abuzz. All abuzz and all aflutter, and immediately starts commanding his household about him for these beings. He knew something. We have to remember, Jeff, this is not his first time that he had some experience with the supernatural realm.
That's a really good point, Neil. He does. He goes right to work. He goes. He says even quickly prepare. So it's really, really, really great. And then whoever asks Abraham, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And and then they lay a bombshell on him, right? That he has been told before, but this is being said more specifically. I will surely return to you at this time. By the way, I, right? 3 men,
right.
I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son when I return. And Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. And this was interesting because in previous chapters, only Abraham got this word. And now here we have Sarah hearing it directly, right? Directly. And Abraham and Sarah were old in advanced age, and Sarah was way past childbearing, blah, blah, blah. And Sarah laughed to herself, saying to herself, after I have become old, shall I have pleasure? Very interesting, right? Shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And so the Lord, Yahweh, said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall indeed I bear a child when I am so old? Is there anything too difficult for Yahweh? They're saying to Abraham, at the appointed time I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son. So repetition, anytime God says it twice or 3 times, he means it, right? So, and then Sarah denied laughing, blah, blah, blah. But why is this laughing important?
Well, for me, it's very telling because most people, to whatever degree they are familiar with this story, which again, this is one of the most famous stories that almost universally people will identify with in the Bible, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, believers or non. And what most people take away is Sarah, and many people have preached on this over the years, she laughed, she showed lack of faith in God, the woman, all a product of the fall.
And if you take this story just on its own, it's possible to go there.
Absolutely.
But we have other references.
Well, the other reference specifically was in just the immediate preceding chapters. Abraham himself, when he heard that you will have a biological heir, not through Sarah, it wasn't revealed to him yet, he laughed. So why is it, again, this whole idea of our state of being that we find ourselves in now, where it's unequally yoked between male and female representation of God, that we remember so specifically that Sarah laughed. Abraham also laughed. And as we discussed, what kind of a laugh was it, Jeff? I mean, you can laugh without laughing at somebody. You can give me really good news and I'll start laughing with you, or we'll laugh together. Or you can laugh with, I hope that's a true statement. Whatever, we don't know the laugh, except in this case, the men, God, they, he, whomever, it goes back and forth within the same chapters, called her out and said, nothing is too important. That's the main thrust of this whole thing, is not that she laughed, but that he wanted her to realize. And he wanted her to hear, Jeff. It's crucial that we realize Sarah was not eavesdropping. She had a right to be at the entrance to the tent, which is also significant because we read later in Scripture that women had a function at the entrance to the tent. This is illuminating further scriptures and reality of she was in her rightful place when God said, where is Sarah, your wife? What, he didn't know? This was Yahweh speaking, right? This is indicative of when Adam and his wife Havah first fell, and God said, Adam, where are you? There was more to that, and he's saying the same thing here. Where is Sarah, your wife? He didn't know she was right there at the tent. He knew. He wanted her to be involved in this.
So that's a really good point. It wasn't taking inventory.
Right.
He was wanting Sarah to be present.
He was wanting her to be present and attentive, because it's just like you. If you're with me and I'm talking, all of a sudden I say something like, so Jeff, let me ask you something. All of a sudden you're not just present, you're focused, right? I'm paying attention diligently. Where is Sarah? Oh, yeah, I'm here. You see me standing right here, right? At the entrance to the tent. So it's very, a lot goes on that we can read right past if we're not looking for it.
And Isaac's name.
Right.
Talk about that relative to What's going on here?
Well, it's quite fascinating because now God drops, as you said, on Abraham, further elaboration of the covenant. One, he brings Sarah into the covenant, right? She is not a superfluous participant. She is crucial. She is
in a lot of ways.
She is in all the ways, right?
Yeah.
And she's part of the covenant. God makes the covenant with and to and through Sarah as much as Abraham at this point, as he's expanding. And he tells Abraham, who recently went through the circumcision process with his 13-year-old son through Hagar, Ishmael. So this is shortly thereafter, this circumcision. He's probably still a little bit
sore,
right? It doesn't stop him from running around.
Right.
Because he's perceived, as we said, that word saw, he perceives there's something's going on here again. It's quite something. Sarah's called in, and he says, you shall have a son named Yitzhak, or Isaac, laughter. And indeed, Sarah laughed. Laughter, she laughs later. Obviously, Yitzhak, very little is written about Yitzhak. Very, very little in Scripture. But one thing we can rest assured in knowing is that he's one of those kind of guys, if you knew him, you would like him. Because everybody likes a guy who's happy, laughs, embracing. That embodied who he was. Laughter. Names were important in the Bible, and now that was his persona. Laughter. And he brought laughter. People would have liked him. We just have little written about him. But now we know that he's on his way.
So after that, the men got up and they moved off to the side a little bit, and they looked towards Sodom and the 5 cities. And they looked in that direction, and Abraham was walking along with them, and we get an internal dialogue here. Right? Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Interesting, that repetition there, is it not? It's very interesting. Repetition. God doesn't repeat for nothing, right?
Right.
Okay. Mighty nation, and indeed nations, father of nations, which is what Abraham means. And then he goes on, in internal dialogue. I have chosen him so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. These are mandates, right?
Right.
So that the Lord may bring upon Abraham what he has spoken about him. So, and then the Lord says, and this is again Yahweh, the outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave. I will go down now to see if they have done entirely according to its outcry, which has come to me, and if not, I will know whether it's true or not. And the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham was standing before Yahweh. And that to me right there indicates a delineation between Yahweh and the men.
Right. We don't know, though. It never says man 1, man 2, man 3.
Right.
It just says Yahweh said, he said, they said.
Yeah.
And so we never specifically know, except that Yahweh is in that group of 3.
Okay.
Yahweh specifically.
Okay, and that's indicative of what happens coming up here.
Right.
Okay, great,
very,
great.
very important.
Excellent point. So Abraham came near and said to Yahweh, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Now, this begins a dialogue right here, Neil, with God, with Yahweh,
right,
about what's going to happen at Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham is doing something that he hasn't done before. And he's doing something that is, he's intervening or interceding on behalf of the city.
Right.
And he's in a sense asking God to justify doing it.
Right. Yeah, what we're seeing in at least as being recorded is as you just said, something new about Abraham, which all of these stories are about his unfolding, his becoming more of who he is meant to be with each successive trial or event of his life. It tells us something more. In this case, it shows that with trepidation he reached out to the Lord, and he said, what about for 50? And we can see in the story he becomes progressively, if you will, braver, or reaches out a little more because he sees that this entity, which we get to read as Yahweh, Abraham saw, perceived, and knew something's up here. If he knew it was Yahweh, he would have been face down on his face the whole time, but he's still trying to somewhat sort through what is this vision, what is this visitation, what is happening here. It's something more than just three strangers. Yeah. But he becomes braver and braver as the Lord allows him and encourages him. That's the part of the story here, is that Yahweh is an actively, willingly participant.
Willing to participate.
To stay there
with Abraham.
And watch his growth as he tries to bargain on behalf, intercede, intervene, step in the breach on behalf of sinners. Because here, as we said, God is not random. He didn't just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and say, I've had enough of these folks, I'm toasting them. No, he said specifically, one of the three, I, Yahweh, am going to go down, one of the three of the group, and I will investigate, verify, and see if they're, which he already in previous chapters said they are exceedingly wicked. So we knew that, where Lot chose to live.
And this maybe goes back, because people might be saying, but Jeff, God is omniscient. He knows. Why would he say to Abraham, I'm going to go down and see?
Right.
Well, we've talked about this before. Abraham doesn't know. He's just revealing to Abraham on a human level, right, what he's doing.
Right.
He does know.
Right.
He said he knew.
Right.
But he's just talking to Abraham as, at a level that Abraham can understand.
Yeah, and for us to understand, too. It all goes into what does God know, doesn't know, what does he allow, doesn't know, how much is predetermined, how much can be changed through prayer and intercession. We don't know how this works. We see very dimly, as the New Testament says. But what we do get out of this is that God is not random. However he's going to check it out or know or reveals that, he did not just say, I've had enough like we do, and lash out. He said, I am going to judge this accurately. Remember, that is what Abraham called him, the righteous judge of the whole earth. You are not just a random, I have power, I'll nuke you. That's the kind of thing men do. But God says, no, I will rationally judge this situation.
And Abraham, the contest or the objection that Abraham raises is, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?
Right.
Okay. There might be some righteous people there. Why would you just destroy them all? Okay. And that's a pretty interesting thing. And then his first question to Yahweh is, well, what if there's 50 righteous people within the city? Will you indeed sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50?
Right. Right.
And that's a pretty gutsy thing to say. And then he says, far be it from you.
Right.
You to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated the same. Far be it from you.
Right.
Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? So we're getting a sense here of justice,
right?
What justice is, which is going to be a very important thing in Revelation.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
right,
exactly. Yeah. But we've already seen Revelation already completely taught, just even in the Abraham. There's nothing new. It's all just a repeat, an elaboration, a rehashing, a different view. But it's the same things we're seeing here now. We see then. The same things we read then, we can read now.
And we go to, we can begin with Adam and Eve.
Correct.
Don't eat from that tree.
Correct.
They did.
Correct.
They suffered a penalty.
Correct.
Or an outcome, a consequence for that. Then we go to Noah. The earth is gone to hell, right?
Yes.
God says, I'm wiping them out.
That's exactly right.
Build a ship.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, same thing, right?
Right.
God is just. God is just. God is just.
Right. Yeah, it says the whole earth was in Noah's day corrupt, in the same way that the 5 cities of the plain embody that in the microcosm of those 5 cities where Noah voluntarily lives and resides. That's the same thing that God's looking at again. This was the same thing I sent a flood to purify and start again. And here they are right back at it. So that's
he's also
another type.
He's also keeping his promise never again
to
take out the earth with a flood.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not using a flood. Not using water this time.
I think he has plenty of means at his disposal, right? But he's patient. He allows an intercessor or an intervener who's righteous.
Yeah.
What isn't that hearken to many of the New Testament about the prayers and intercession of a righteous person avails much?
Avails much.
We don't know how much is predetermined that it's written in stone, as it were.
As it were.
To take a mosaic, the tablets, it's written in stone, or how much we can influence or change or avert the judgment. But here we're learning that God allows you to come into His presence, and God is not anxious. He's not looking at his watch saying, "Come on, Abraham, come on, I've got to get down to Sodom. I got work to do." No, it's very clear. All of a sudden, he steps back. Abraham stays in his presence. God stays in Abraham's. God is finding great joy in, wow, my Messiah type is interceding on behalf of holy, wicked, and perverse people to save them. I've got time.
Abraham, he's making time for a person he sees becoming himself, right? And Neil, I just want to go back to our first parshot.
Yeah.
Go.
Right.
For yourself.
Right.
Go
exactly.
for yourself.
That's
right. So
exactly
the journey that Abraham embarked on when God said go was not just a journey of God, God's plan. It was also God's plan for Abraham and who Abraham becomes.
Exactly
and before you say that, so this is verse 26 and 27 here are to me amazing. Yahweh says, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole place on their account." And then Abraham, right, gets more bold. "Now behold," or "Hey, look,
wow, yeah,
I have ventured to speak to you, to the Lord, although I am but dust and ashes." He's saying, "Hey, I'm doing this." You know? He's proclaiming his willingness to do it.
He's learning the proportional relationship about I can do this, but at the same time he's acknowledging, and I am nobody to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And so what we don't want to give to our audience or anybody who may hear this idea of arrogance, I will just talk to God, I will be free,
Yeah.
I'm his pal.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of both are true at the same time of I can come in, I can be bold, I am nothing. Both are true at the same time. And you have to find, this is the Lech Lecha, this is the story here. And God, Jeff, it's crucial that we say these parshots of Abraham are just gold because they're so easy in a very short space of time to just keep pulling these things out. He wants us to get a picture of, through Abraham, who Messiah is, what he can do, what the perfect does. And this is a picture of this intercession. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, while it will, and we will elaborate, it's about warfare, destruction, judgment. The story is not about destruction. The story is not about God saying, I'm mad, I'm going to go toast them because I have the power and they're not doing what I want. That's not what the story's about. The story really is about what you're just reading here. The Messiah, in this case, figure.
Yes.
The Abrahamic Messiah figure.
Just as Noah was a figure.
Exactly right. Making a way to not suffer the just repercussions from the just judge. And that's what he's trying to show here. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, again, made clear, is not about destroying. It's about saving.
This idea of Messiah all the way through.
All the way through.
Beginning with Noah. Adam and Eve are not necessarily, but beginning with Noah. He's the first who saves. And then Abraham saves. He rescued Lot before, too, right? Saves, right? And then we're going to see Moses, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go there. But he says to Yahweh, suppose there's only 45.
Right. Right.
I will not destroy it if I find 45 there, he says to Abraham. So he spoke to him yet again and says, suppose 40 are found. I will not do it on account of 40. So God, I think, is really enjoying this. In the way that he's pleased with what he sees in Abraham.
This is the way to read this. It's very much so that God is like, perfect. Mm-hmm. I've got all the time in the world to listen. Mm-hmm. I personally think if you watch it go down, 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 down here as you will continue, I believe that God would have allowed, had Abraham had the wherewithal thinking or faith or understanding or whatever, to say, Lord, I just ask you not to do it in my own righteousness, if you will, because he is declared righteous. Mm-hmm. God saved Lot because of Abraham's righteousness. We'll read that later.
Yes,
it's because
we will. Yeah.
I believe that Abraham's goodness, zest for God, the prayers, the fervent prayers of a righteous man, as the New Testament says, I believe he could have said, Lord, they are a wicked city, as you know, or wicked group of cities, a wicked area. Save them on my account. I believe the Lord would have said, Abraham, I will do that for you. It wasn't 10 was a magical number, although it is. It's a minion. We've talked about that before, the 10 and so on. It has significance, and we'll get there. But God was not in a hurry, and Abraham was not holding him back from doing something. God enjoyed this.
Yeah. What you said there in verse 30, what you said a minute ago about who Abraham is, how he's approaching, how he's talking to God, it's not arrogant, right? Okay. Behold, I venture, then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry, and I shall speak. Suppose 30 are found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30. So he's saying to God, please don't be angry with me, but I'm going to continue, right? Which is profound, right? And then he says, now behold, Abraham says, I have ventured to speak. So he knows he's sticking his neck out, right? That's what an adventure is, right? He's sticking his neck out to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found. And he said, I will not destroy it. And then he said, oh, may the Lord not be angry. So he's still humble, right? I shall speak only this once. Suppose 10 are found there. And he said, I will not destroy it on account of 10. And then it says, as soon as he finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his tent, his place. And so that it's an amazing process to watch Abraham's growth be revealed, right? His growth has happened to him over this many years, right? He's been sojourning with the Lord when the Lord said, go, right? And here he is. Here he is at this place in Hebron, right? He kind of parks here, right? This is kind of where he ends up.
Yeah, that area of Hebron is crucial. He does ultimately go over not too far to the west in that area, but it's all kind of a big area. It's all kind of Abraham's land in a sense. But this is crucial, this area of Hebron, and that is ultimately where he is buried.
So we observe Abraham. So it says the Lord departed, right? The Yahweh,
right? Lord
departed, and Abraham returned. So Abraham didn't leave. He waited.
Well, I would just say that, Jeff, there are versions, there's ways of reading this last portion here where it says, as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham, the Lord departed, as though the Lord, again, gives the wrong impression that the Lord wants to get out of this discussion. Remember, it's Abraham who said, I'm only going to speak one more time. I believe he could have kept that up because the whole context here is, and depending on how you read it, the Lord is nodding and smiling, saying, I won't do it for 30. This is great. I won't do it for 20. 10. I won't do it for 10. But the point here is not just that. It's how you intone the reading. It's how you see what's being said in the original language. Even it gives it a little clearer. But this verse 33, some versions read as soon as Abraham finished speaking to the Lord, not the Lord finished speaking to Abraham. In other words, God's got time. I'll
does.
sit here with you.
Yeah.
I want you to find yourself.
Yeah.
As you said, Lech Lecha, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So it is correct to read it the way we see it here and as you read it, but it's also correct to say as soon as Abraham finished speaking to the Lord, then the Lord said, okay, then I'll go.
So, in other words, he heard him out. You're saying that God heard him out. He made sure Abraham was done.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's
Yeah.
a good way. Yeah, he was not in any hurry. He did not have to be talked out of it. He was allowing Abraham to find out who he was, the type he was fulfilling ultimately, and God had time.
There's an interesting also parallel that Jesus is on the throne right now interceding for us
Right.
all the time. Okay, and Abraham as a Messiah, as a type of Messiah, also intercedes on behalf of any righteous that might be there.
Right. Exactly.
in that
right.
city. It's a really, really powerful correlation, and we don't get that too often. I don't think we don't hear about that. But I want to end here because I just want to briefly talk about the first verse in chapter 19.
Right. It's crucial.
Yeah, the two angels came to Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. So we know that Yahweh, which is one of the three, stayed with Abraham.
That's exactly right.
And the other two, whomever they were, angels, I'm going to say, I don't know, but celestial beings of some sort, because Lot, treats them in a certain way. But anyway, the two go.
Right. So now we have to ask ourselves this question. How is it that one of these beings identified as Yahweh, and again, we don't know if it changes at different times, if when it's referring to the singular, if that's man 3 or man 1 or man 2, if it kind of, I have this image of a red light above each one's head that, okay, this time this is Yahweh and this time this. We don't know. All we know is that they're variously called plural and singular, variously men, variously Yahweh. We know that sometimes it says, and they said, well, again, as you and I have pointed out, Jeff, how is it that anyone could be so presumptuous to be in the presence of Yahweh and they speak up as they choose to? But it says that's what they do through this chapter 18. Chapter 19, we have to remember these were man-made delineations so that reading the Bible, the scriptures would be easier with chapters and verses. And they're good. It's good, but sometimes it can be confusing because we think a thought ends here or a thought ends there, and I read that for the night, so I'm done. But really it continues on. The crucial point that you're trying to get to here is Yahweh specifically said, I will go down and I will see if this is, to this level.
True. Yeah.
I'm going to stay here and talk to Abraham which is what we did. And then it says the two men went off, and Abraham and God left. So wait a minute. God stayed, and he said, I'm going to go, but he doesn't go. The two of the three parts go. So again, this is giving us pictures here of who are these, but they're called men. Make no mistake, they're called angels only here for the first time.
For the first time.
For the very first time. Angels.
Yeah.
Now, for us being believers, of course, there's this mystical thing of the Trinity and of when is it an angel, when is it a man, what is a man, is it Yahweh, is it Elohim, is it El Elyon, is it Adonai, how does that all composite figure work? But we know that there are angels, because you and I have talked about it before. John's visit again, if we jump to Revelation, he starts worshiping an angel, and the angel tells him, don't do that, we don't do this here, but the angel's talking as though he is the Lord. So it's very we see darkly. It's hard to understand, but your point again, bringing it back around, this is so significant that God said, I'm going to go, but only two go.
And in this next episode, folks, we're going to take the deep dive into chapter 19, where we learned a great deal about Lot, and we're going to have some great discussion about Lot, and it's going to be an interesting time, because Neil and I have talked about this privately for like 3 hours the other day, so it'll be an interesting conversation. So stay tuned for that chapter, for chapter 19, the next time we meet. This has been a great discussion for this episode of Israel. Why is the Middle East important? I look forward to how this continues to unfold. As you can tell, Neil and I enjoy talking about the subject as it helps us to get to the root of the matter about God and why Israel and the Middle East are so important. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and we would love to hear from you. Visit us at our home at Spreaker.com. Israel, why is the Middle East important? That's Spreaker.com. Israel, why is the Middle East important? And you can find us on Facebook using that same title. And you can email us at whyisthemiddleeastimportant@gmail.com. That's whyisthemiddleeastimportant@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. If you like what you hear, please invite your friends to the conversation. One thing Neil and I always say to each other is, I don't know. Because the only way we know is to not know. Once you have it all figured out, you stop learning. And that state of mind is what helps us to learn and grow. We invite you into that journey with us. From Neil Johnson and me, Jeff Pelletier, shalom, and see you next time.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאיר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, Ve'asem lecha